white heavy checkmark, HTML PDF, MS. Julia, the process for your scheduled feigned death service has been completed. The time and method of death will be a fire 5 days from now, and the person feigning death will be you. Julia nodded. Correct, MS. Julia, the fire will cause you some harm. Are you sure about this? Julia was taken aback. The pain of being burned to the bone in her previous life resurfaced, causing her to shiver involuntarily. Someone wanted me to die in a fire, so I simply granted their wish. In her past life, City B everyone knew how pathetic and she was as MS. Marshall. Matthew despised her and even made threats for the sake of his lover Kristen. The Marshall family's assets would never be divided for her, nor would they allow her to bear a child. No one knew that this marriage was something Matthew had pursued for 10 years, proposing 99 times before finally obtaining it, during their honeymoon trip. When they encountered a terrorist attack, Matthew held her tightly in his arms. He himself was struck in the back of the head by a stray bullet and remained in a coma for 6 months. After waking up, not only did he forget Julia, but he also fell in love with the caregiver Kristen. Julia tried every possible way to help Matthew regain his memory, but he misunderstood her, thinking she was after the family fortune. A month later, she handed the pregnancy test report to Matthew. But his face darkened. Get rid of it. If Kristen finds out, I'll kill you. Julia pleaded with him to let her keep the child, willing to leave with nothing, and give up her position as MS. Marshall to Kristen. With or without you, Kristen is the only MS. Marshall. I will never let this bastard child taint the love between me and Kristen. Julia turned deathly pale, kneeling before him. No, I beg you. Matthew expressionlessly pinched her neck and forced the abortion drug into her mouth. The foul smell clogged her chest. Julia struggled to stick her index finger down her throat, trying to vomit the decoction she had just swallowed, but as soon as she spat out a mouthful of black liquid, a heavy pain began to cramp her lower abdomen. Blood flowed from between her legs, staining the villa's white carpet red. Lock her in the attic, and don't let her out until she's lost the child. Moonlight streamed in through the attic window, illuminating Julia, who lay in a pool of blood. Blood loss caused her body temperature to plummet. She curled into a small ball, her lips still murmuring, Matthew, until a sudden, raging fire reduced her to ashes. The cold wind brought Julia back to reality from her memories. She hailed a taxi. Driver, to the hospital. MS. Julia, you are indeed 3 months pregnant. It's a pair of twins, and they are very healthy. Julia lovingly stroked the 2 small embryos in the photo, then looked up with determination in her eyes. Thank you. But please schedule an abortion for me. Not long after, Julia walked weakly out of the operating room, suddenly letting out a pale, bitter smile. It was unclear whether she was laughing at the hardships she had endured in her past life, or at the children who had been abandoned twice before they could even be born. The screen across from the hospital was playing Matthew and Kristen's love video. They kissed in front of the island sunset, drawing envious sighs from those around them. I really love her and Matthew's love story. Yes, Mr. Matthew woke up and the first thing he saw was Kristen wiping his face, and he fell in love on the spot. What a pity. MS. Marshall's position is now taken by someone else. If I were her, I'd be too ashamed to show my face. How utterly detestable. The undisguised, cutting remarks pierced her heart like sharp arrows. Julia closed her eyes, struggling to suppress the stinging pain rising in her heart. She lowered her head and hurried away. But as she reached the corner of the stairs, a solid figure suddenly collided with her, causing the already weak Julia to fall to the ground. Sorry, Julia, you actually dare to follow me. The familiar coldness came through. Julia's heart tightened even more. She slowly got up from the ground. I didn't. Then why are you at the hospital, and so coincidentally bump into me? Julia, I've really underestimated you. If you keep playing tricks in front of me, you'll regret it. Before she could speak, a pair of pale, slender hands wrapped around Matthew. Matthew, don't be so harsh with Julia. She just wanted to see you. After all, Julia is the rightful MS. Marshall. While I'm just an outsider. Kristen's beautiful eyes dimmed, the corners still slightly red. Kristen, I only recognize you as my MS. Marshall in this lifetime. Those clowns are nothing. No one can threaten your position. Matthew finished, shooting a fierce glare at Julia. You bitch. If you keep bullying Kristen while flaunting your status as MS. Marshall, I'll kick you out without any regard for past ties. His tone was filled with the same old, overwhelming disdain. Julia, her nails dug deep into her flesh, the corners of her eyes unbearably sore. The former Matthew, even if she said nothing, would understand her meaning. And now, even if she didn't speak, as long as she was still alive, she was a threat to him and Kristen. Kristen pretended to panic and reached out to grab Julia's hand. Julia, don't listen to Matthew's nonsense. You will always be Ms. Marshall. Please don't go back and complain to Grandma. The delicate, boneless fingers touched Julia's skin, yet it felt like 5 venomous snakes coiling around her, hissing with their forked tongues. Don't touch me. Julia pushed her hand away, seemingly without using much force, yet Kristen staggered as if about to fall. Kristen. Matthew burst through and rushed over, embracing Kristen in his arms. Julia, however, was knocked down the stairs by his forceful momentum. Someone fell down the stairs. Call a doctor. Julia tumbled down dozens of steps and crashed heavily onto the floor. The intense pain immediately knocked her unconscious, on the steps. Matthew, after calming the person in his arms, glanced at the carried-away Julia, and an inexplicable panic surged within him. Kristen spoke weakly. Matthew. Seeing him distracted, a flicker of malice flashed in her eyes. Matthew, what if Grandma finds out Julia got hurt and blames you? It's all because of me. Kristen's words brought Matthew back to his senses, filling him with even more anger. You hurt her and still show no remorse. You must be acting again. When Julia woke up, there was only a young nurse in the hospital room adjusting her drip. You're awake. You just had a miscarriage, then low blood sugar, and then you fell. It's really a miracle you came around. Julia bruises covered her entire body, and her sprained foot was wrapped up like a zongza. Oh, by the way, a man dropped off a card, said it was for the medical expenses, but there's only 5,000 in it. You'll still need to pay another 2,000. Julia never expected Matthew to be by her side. After all, back then, in order to persuade Matthew to continue taking the memory-restoring medication, she had even endured standing in the rain for 10 hours in front of Kristen's house. In the end, she collapsed from a high fever. Matthew walked right past her without even a glance, his arm around Kristen. Her phone chimed with a message from Kristen. Julia, are you awake? Do you want me to try and persuade Matthew to visit you? But you'll have to wait until after we finish watching the movie. Originally it was only 2 hours, but he kept pausing midway to mess with me, and I was almost unable to handle it. Along with it came a video. The screen shook as pale bodies tangled together, making Julia's scalp tingle, and she leaned over the bedside retching. Seeing this, the young nurse quickly brought over a spittoon. With nothing to eat all day, Julia could only vomit bitter bile. She wiped the tears and filth from her face haphazardly with a tissue, laughing uncontrollably. Matthew had been lying in the hospital for half a year. She quit her job to hold up the Marshall family for him, desperately protecting the family business from being eroded by competitors. Yet Matthew suspected her of seizing power with ill intentions and took back half of the shares he had given her when they got married. Marshall's family all told him that the person he loved most was Julia. But he believed that Julia had bribed his family just to consolidate her position. He even allowed Kristen to block and delete all his friends and relatives from his phone. She used to blame everything on her amnesia, desperately clinging to a faint sweetness from the past to keep going until now. Now that fire has made her see clearly. Matthew just doesn't love her anymore. Julia was discharged from the hospital the very next afternoon. There were still 4 days until the fake death. And she had many things to do. She transferred her years of savings under her new identity, booked a flight ticket, and then went home. To her surprise, the lights were on at home. A sudden sense of foreboding gripped her heart. Julia had no time to look around further and rushed straight to the far end of the second floor. The once tidy room was now in complete disarray. The shabby antiques she had hunted down with Matthew, along with the various hairpins and vintage dresses she had painstakingly restored by hand, were all thrown on the floor and crumpled into heaps. Several black high-heeled footprints were stamped across the plain silk surfaces. Julia picked up the clothes with a pained heart. Disgust clung to her like maggots feasting on her marrow. She closed her eyes, no longer able to shed a single tear. The loud, incessant noises from the master bedroom continued to pour out. Julia kicked the door open with a loud bang, startling the 2 people on the bed and making them flinch. Julia, are you crazy? Who gave you permission to come in? Matthew shouted sternly. Kristen nervously buried herself in his arms, her eyes welling up with tears. I'm sorry, Julia. Matthew and I just got carried away in the moment. Please don't be angry. Kristen, why are you apologizing to her? She's an outsider and has no right to interfere with us. Matthew. But she acted as if she hadn't heard, taking several boxes out of the safe, only to find that one of the jade bracelets was missing. She turned around abruptly and saw Kristen wearing a touch of emerald green on the hand draped around Matthew's neck. Julia walked straight over, grabbed Kristen's wrist, and tried to pull the bracelet off. Ah, Julia, what are you doing? That hurts, Kristen cried out, Matthew shoved her away furiously. You fucking touch her again and see what happens. Julia couldn't take it anymore and shouted, give me back my bracelet. Matthew was taken aback and looked at Kristen's wrist. What are you yelling about over some broken bracelet? It's this bracelet's good fortune that Kristen even deigns to look at it. Give me back my bracelet, Julia stubbornly repeated. Matthew impatiently lifted his eyes, only to see Julia with despair in her eyes that was 1,000 times more sorrowful than ever before. Matthew, Kristen pitifully called out to him. Matthew pressed his lips together. Give it back to her. Kristen, a flicker of ruthlessness flashed in her eyes as she obediently handed over the bracelet. Julia, I really love this bracelet. Here, returning it to you. Hold it carefully, okay? The bracelet swung lightly a couple of times between Kristen's fair, delicate fingers, then brushed past Julia's hand and fell to the ground. After a crisp sound, the jade bracelet shattered into several pieces. All three of their expressions changed. Kristen turned pale and started crying. Julia, I told you to hold it properly. Why didn't you catch it? Such a beautiful bracelet is now broken. What a pity. Julia's pupils went blank for a moment, and suddenly the face of her mother who passed away many years ago appeared in her mind. This bracelet was a generational dowry for the daughters of the Marshall family. The meaning is that she and her husband are like this ring, seeing each other every day, on the wedding day. Matthew solemnly kissed this bracelet, vowing to the ancestors of the Marshall family that he would love only Julia for the rest of his life. If he broke this vow, he would be punished by losing everything and never being able to rise again. And now, the woman he brought back from outside has shattered this bracelet. Kristen sobbed uncontrollably. Julia found it utterly boring. She raised her hand and slapped Kristen hard across the face. Have you cried enough? Kristen was slapped so hard her mind went blank. Julia, how dare you hit me? Matthew instantly flared up with rage. You bitch, who gave you the nerve to hit someone in my house? Julia slapped him back across the face. Fair point. To beat the dog, first beat the master. This slap caught Matthew completely off guard. And the look he gave Julia was utterly absurd. Shrew, how could I have married a madwoman like you as Ms. Marshall? I must have been blind. Do you think you can throw a tantrum on whose turf? With just one word from me, I guarantee you'll die without a burial place in City H. And to think Kristen always speaks up for you, telling me to be more understanding of your extreme mindset from staying alone in an empty room. Is this how you repay her? Julia, I'm telling you, if you don't kneel and apologize in front of me and Kristen today, this isn't over. Julia lifted her face and said word by word, in your dreams, you. Matthew stepped forward and grabbed her throat, his handsome features twisted like a demon. Julia, you're asking for death. The feeling of suffocation was exactly the same as when she was forced to drink the abortion medicine in her previous life. The crisis of impending death left the brain at a loss, scrambling to mobilize every possible means to prevent it. But Julia's entire strength was no match for Matthew's grip, and she gradually ceased struggling. If dying at the hands of Matthew was her fate, then so be it. Suddenly, she saw the 17-year-old Matthew, his eyes red and trembling uncontrollably, appearing before her. Julia, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. Julia smiled with relief. Matthew, take me away with you. But 17-year-old Matthew shook his head. Julia, don't wait for me anymore. Go live the life that belongs to you. Matthew suddenly snapped back to reality. As soon as he let go, Julia slumped to the ground like a rag doll, tears uncontrollably rolling from the corners of her eyes. Matthew, don't be angry. Please don't act impulsively. Kristen rushed over to stop Matthew, pretending to anxiously check Julia's condition. Julia, are you okay? Should we call an ambulance for you? Julia exerted all her strength and said hoarsely, Get out, Julia, now is not the time to be stubborn. Just apologize to Matthew, and this matter will be over. Matthew was also waiting for Julia to speak, but after panting for a long time, she only managed to spit out a few words. Get lost, you're an eyesore, disgusting. He grabbed Kristen and pulled her up. Don't pay attention to this ungrateful wretch, let's go. But Kristen glanced back unwillingly at the box on the table, where any one of the antique pieces inside was worth a fortune. After getting dressed, Matthew was the first to walk out of the room. Kristen crouched down, picked up the jade fragments, and gently pressed them against Julia's face. Do you think Matthew would hate you a little more if I made a scratch like this? Julia didn't give her any reaction. What a pity for such a pretty face. If it were anyone else, who wouldn't treasure you like a precious gem. Too bad your opponent is me. As long as I don't let go of Matthew, you'll never be able to take him back in this lifetime. Julia closed her eyes wearily. Do whatever you want. Anyway, she didn't want him anymore. A low voice came from the stairs. Matthew. Kristen. Come quickly, Kristen replied in a pinched voice. I'm coming. She casually tossed the fragments aside and tilted her head playfully. I'll let you off this time. But be careful next time. After the two had left, Aunt Lee from the first floor finally dared to come up, unable to hold back her tears. Julia, how are you? The young master has really gone too far this time. Julia, with dark purple hand prints on her neck, still forced a smile and patted her gently. Aunt Lee, for the sake of our acquaintance, could you do me a favor? Having lived in this house for over a decade, there were far too many things that belonged to Julia. There were paper stars they folded together as children, the first love letter given to Matthew, the diamond ring she personally designed and carved. Julia unhesitatingly doused the boxes with an entire bucket of gasoline, the towering flames nearly lighting up half the sky. Aunt Lee stood behind her, continuously wiping away tears. Julia, she had witnessed all the grievances and pain over so many years. Every time she saw the living room light staying on later and later, and her figure growing thinner, she couldn't help but wonder if the young master from before could see her like this, would he still have let her leave his side? A night breeze swept through, lifting the burning ashes and illuminating Julia's eyes, now filled with relief and liberation. Matthew, I'll listen to you. I don't want Matthew anymore. I want to go live my own life. Early the next morning, Julia went to NS Cemetery to say goodbye to her parents. The man and woman on the tombstone smiled gently. Julia could no longer hold back the grievances in her heart from pouring out. Every time she was bullied as a child, she would come here to beg them to take her away. Later, Matthew found out and would accompany her every time. But ever since he lost his memory, no matter how Julia pleaded, he never came again. They're your parents. What does sweeping their graves have to do with me? Don't waste my time. How unlucky. Matthew. His. Julia, Mom, Dad, I'm leaving this time, and perhaps I'll never come back in this lifetime. Please forgive your unfilial daughter for not being able to visit often in the future. I broke my promise. I couldn't bring Matthew along, however, from now on, he won't be coming anymore. Winter days get dark quickly. Julia couldn't see any light after coming down from the mountain, and had to rely on her phone's flashlight. The cold wind whistled behind her, carrying a somewhat eerie atmosphere, making her heartbeat quicken involuntarily. There was still some distance from South Mountain to the main road. Julia walked faster and faster, and in a daze, she heard the footsteps behind her becoming increasingly clear. The lights on the highway grew brighter and brighter. Suddenly, several figures darted out from the bushes on both sides, led by a man with a roguish demeanor. Hey beautiful, why walk so fast? Come have some fun with us. Julia was jolted awake by the bumpy ride. The moment she opened her eyes, she found herself lying in a speeding van. The back of her head throbbed with a dull, persistent pain from her injury. Not only were her limbs tightly bound with rough rope, but a rag had been stuffed in her mouth, making even the slightest movement a struggle. The men in the car spoke loudly without any restraint. Boss, didn't that woman promise we could have some fun with her? What's the rush? We're not there yet. Miss Wen said we have to go to the hotel and record a video for her first. Otherwise she won't pay. That doesn't mean we can't have a go first. I can't hold back any longer. I'm going in first. Julia suddenly widened her eyes, struggling desperately, letting out muffled cries from her mouth. Holy shit, she's awake. Where's the anesthetic? Give her a shot. Julia stared at the cold, gleaming needle. Overwhelmed by immense fear and despair, she shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. The yellow-haired man grinned, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. Don't worry, beautiful, we'll take good care of you. The driver frowned and said, hurry up, we'll reach the toll booth soon. As the cold medication flowed into her veins, Julia was subdued by its effects. She collapsed helplessly onto the seat, watching in despair as the man reached out toward her. Suddenly, a pure black Rolls-Royce sped out from behind the van. It made an extreme U-turn and collided with the van. The blonde guy's head hit the window, leaving a trail of blood. Damn it, how are you driving? As soon as the words were spoken, he froze. A man stepped out of the Rolls-Royce, dressed in pure black athletic wear, a mask covering half his face, revealing only his cold, sharp eyes. You little punk, what are you trying to prove all by yourself? Grab your weapons and get him. The men got out of the car with aggressive intent. Before he could raise the iron rod, 3 police cars surrounded them with their sirens blaring. 2 teams of SWAT officers aimed their guns. Nobody move, hands up. Julia was lifted from the car, the biting cold wind dispelling the nausea in her throat. She struggled to open her eyes to see the man's face, but her eyelids grew heavier and heavier. Before completely losing consciousness, she heard the man whisper softly, I've finally found you." It was already early morning by the time they finished taking the statement. The policewoman told Julia that they had kidnapped her for money. From the lead phone, they found a contact named Miss Wen, who was the mastermind behind hiring the killer. Overwhelming rage and hatred burned in Julia's heart. Her chest felt torn apart, and a metallic taste of blood surged up her throat. She suddenly turned around and coughed up a mouthful of stagnant blood. "Ms. Julia." The policewoman quickly supported her. "I'll take you to the hospital." Julia struggled to hold her back. "No need. The procedures are done. I'd like to go home first." "All right, if you have any leads about the person who hired the killer, contact us anytime." Julia returned home in disarray, mustering her strength to fish out the ultrasound report from her bag and sent it to Matthew. "I'm pregnant." The next second, Matthew's phone call came through. Julia directly pressed the power off button and went to take a shower. An hour later, Matthew's red Porsche drove into the courtyard. He hurriedly pushed open the door and saw Julia leaning against the window with a glass of red wine, looking at him with an indifferent expression. He frowned, and the first thing he said was, "Julia, do you have any common sense? What are you doing drinking alcohol while pregnant?" Julia smiled. "You don't want this child anyway. So what does it matter to you if I drink? Who said I don't want it?" Julia suddenly looked up. "Why is it different from my previous life?" Matthew walked straight over and drank that glass of wine, his expression still icy cold. "I'll pick you up tomorrow for the checkup. If you're lying to me, you're finished." Matthew stayed overnight at home after half a year, but slept in the guest bedroom. Julia in the master bedroom just a wall away from him. She felt no excitement, only full of doubt. This time Matthew didn't make her have an abortion, so how would her plan proceed? But before she could wake up naturally, a flurry of panicked footsteps startled her awake. Kristen's nanny was crying out in panic at the door. "Mr. Matthew, something terrible has happened. Miss Wen has gone missing." "What?" Matthew threw on his coat and was about to rush out. At the staircase landing, he suddenly stopped, turned back with a dark expression, kicked open the master bedroom door, and demanded loudly, "Did you tell Kristen about the pregnancy? Are you that eager to show off in front of her? Did you use the child to force her away? Tell me." Julia looked at Matthew, who had lost control because of Kristen, her heart completely unruffled. Whenever something happened to Kristen, the culprit was undoubtedly her. "Julia, with no evidence needed, what are you laughing at?" Matthew grew even more furious. "I originally intended for you to give birth and hand the child over to Kristen to raise. But now I've changed my mind. I absolutely won't allow a woman of your low character to bear my child and taint the bloodline of my Marshall family." At that moment, the bodyguards of the Marshall family suddenly rushed in. "Mr. Matthew, we've found Miss Wen." But what?" "Miss Wen is on the rooftop of the Marshall family old mansion. She's going to commit suicide." Julia was dragged back to the old mansion by Matthew. When he saw the white figure on the rooftop, he was scared out of his wits, tearfully begging Kristen not to do anything foolish. The Marshall family's servants and elders in the old mansion were all roused, frowning anxiously as they gathered around. Kristen smiled through tears. "Matthew, I love you, but Julia is carrying your child. I can't be so selfish as to let the child grow up without a father." Matthew violently shoved Julia to the ground. "You bitch, did you think using a child would tear me and Kristen apart? You're dreaming." The rose thorns in the garden scratched Julia's face. In a daze, she remembered that this sea of flowers was planted by Matthew for her. "Kristen, I said I would never let this woman have my child, and I meant it. I'll take her for an abortion tomorrow." "No, go brew the abortion medicine now. I'll make her miscarry right away." Grandma Marshall was furious, raised her cane to hit Matthew, but was confronted by Matthew with reddened eyes. "Grandma, are you really going to force the one I love most to die?" Grandma Marshall looked at him with trembling lips, unable to utter another word. 10 minutes later, a servant brought a bowl of steaming hot medicinal brew. Matthew took it, grabbed Julia's hair, and shouted at Kristen, "Kristen, I'm going to force her to drink this abortion potion now. Watch." The familiar, nauseating stench choked her throat. This time Julia didn't struggle at all, directly drinking the medicine clean. Everyone was waiting for the medicine to take effect, but none of them knew yet that the child had long been gone. Kristen let out a desolate smile. Even abortion pills didn't work. "Matthew, it seems this child is your destiny. Matthew, let's continue our love story in the next life." She pretended to jump. Matthew went crazy with panic and immediately kicked Julia in the stomach. The onlookers were stunned, but seeing Matthew's frenzied appearance, no one dared to step forward and stop him. Matthew kicked again and again, not stopping even when Julia was vomiting blood. "Why hasn't she miscarried yet? Hurry up and let it out." Kristen was finally satisfied when she saw Julia curled up motionless on the ground. Matthew, stop hitting her. I believe you. Matthew, as if hearing heavenly music, gazed deeply at Kristen. Kristen, in this world, only you are worthy of bearing my child. Kristen came down from the rooftop and tightly embraced Matthew. Kristen, you're too foolish. How could you give up your life because of a few words from that despicable woman? But that's your child. In my eyes, you're 100 times more important than any child. If you really jump, I won't live either. Julia lay covered in blood on the dirt, forcing a smile. It's about to end. Someone, drag her to the attic and lock her up. Take her to the hospital for a checkup tomorrow. If the miscarriage hasn't happened, perform an abortion. 2 tall bodyguards stepped forward, grabbed Julia, and dragged her all the way to the top floor, leaving a winding trail of blood behind. Julia had seen this attic window at night in her previous life, but this time it was in the daytime. She struggled to pull out her phone and placed it beside her, waiting for the countdown of her life. At 11 o'clock in the evening, Kristen suddenly walked in. Julia, how about it? Did you think that by carrying his child, you could awaken his love for you? You're really naive. The Marshall family has no one to back you up. No one will help you and no one will love you. You can't even protect yourself, let alone the child. Julia struggled to sit up. Kristen, did you tamper with Matthew's memories? Kristen smiled triumphantly. So what if I did? Blame yourself for being too busy cleaning up his mess, leaving me an opening to exploit. I've been injecting him with drugs for half a year. His brain nerves have long been necrotic. He'll never recover his memories in this lifetime. Julia understood and casually asked, was it you who had me kidnapped when I went to NS? You're clever, but it's a shame. I didn't expect you to run into a police checkpoint and escape. Aren't you afraid I'll tell Matthew? Kristen laughed heartily and said, Julia, I said you were naive, and you really don't use your brain. I dare to say this because you definitely won't be leaving this room. It wasn't until Kristen's footsteps faded into the distance that the staff of the fake death agency opened the door and entered. Ms. Julia, there are only 10 minutes left until the service you purchased takes effect. We need to confirm once again, do you really wish to proceed with the fake death? I'm certain. Julia was absolutely determined. Midnight, flames shot up from the attic, with thick, billowing black smoke pouring out, emitting a foul odor. The Marshall family were escorted to the courtyard by bodyguards. Still somewhat in shock, Julia is in the attic, Grandma Marshall suddenly shouted, and everyone's gaze abruptly turned toward the burning area. Matthew stood frozen for 2 seconds before rushing toward the room. Matthew, where are you going? Matthew halted in his tracks. His mind completely blank. Yes, where was he going? He once again cast his gaze toward the attic, now reduced to ruins, and staggered back 2 steps. A sudden, dull pain at the back of his head made him collapse to the ground in agony. The wicked live 1,000 years. Julia couldn't possibly be dead. In the last second before losing consciousness, he saw the servants carrying out a charred body from the attic wreckage. Madam, Mr. Matthew, this is the lady's body. Matthew's mind buzzed. And he suddenly lost consciousness, collapsing to the ground. Matthew plunged into an endless abyss, countless bubbles carrying memories swiftly swept by, all filled with Julia, seeing her joy when he woke up, her hurt when he scolded her, and her tearful pleas. Finally, in the midst of the raging fire, Julia stood wearing a wedding dress, shedding tears of blood. Matthew, I hate you so much. Overwhelming panic and regret instantly flooded his heart. Matthew woke up from overwhelming pain and pushed away Kristen, who came to support him. Where is Julia? I need to find her. Matthew, what nonsense are you talking? Julia is already dead. Matthew stiffened, staring blankly at Kristen. Her memorial service is being held today, and she will be buried tomorrow. Matthew felt a dull ache in his heart, his face pale as he said, Impossible. She can't be dead. I need to go find her. Without a second thought, she pushed Kristen aside and rushed out of the hospital, wearing only a thin patient gown. The moment he pushed open the door of the morning hall, Matthew saw the black and white photo hanging in the center. The girl in the photo wore a faint smile, completely different from the sorrowful and pained expression he remembered. With a grim expression, he strode quickly to the coffin and raised his hand to pry open the tightly nailed lid. The mourners let out a collective gasp, their eyes wide with shock. Mr. Matthew, show some respect for the dead. What do you think you're doing? Matthew snorted. This woman is full of schemes and tricks. She must be faking her death to deceive everyone. I'm going to wake her up right now. Everyone looked at him in disbelief, and some couldn't stand it any longer. Stepping forward to intervene, Mr. Matthew, even if you really dislike Ms. Julia, you should still show some respect for the dead. You don't understand her. She was carrying my child, how could she possibly be willing to die? She's probably lying in that coffin right now, laughing to herself. Julia, I know you're still alive. Come out. Matthew relentlessly beat on the coffin, refusing to stop even when his hands were bright red. Kristen gently stepped forward and held his arm. Matthew, Julia really is already dead. Matthew immediately reddened, his chest heaving violently. Fine, Julia, so you're pretending to be dead. Then don't blame me for what happens next. He grabbed Kristen's hand, but his gaze remained fixed on Julia's funeral portrait. Kristen and I will hold our wedding in 3 days. We sincerely invite everyone to attend. These words felt like a pie falling from the sky. Kristen was stunned for a moment before her eyes lit up with wild joy. Matthew, is it true? Of course it's true. The people present looked at him with disdain and contempt, all speaking up for Julia. Has Matthew gone mad? The first wife hasn't even been buried yet, and is already rushing to bring the mistress into the house. I heard that Matthew locked Julia in the attic. When the fire broke out, she couldn't escape in time and was burned alive. That homewrecker instigated it all. She looks like such an innocent little flower, but who knew her heart could be so vicious? The funeral hall erupted in chaos, yet the coffin remained completely still. Matthew's face was so dark it seemed about to drip with gloom. Julia, how dare you die without my permission? Outside the window, a sudden flash of lightning crossed the sky, and the torrential rain seemed determined to drown the entire city. Why has the weather changed? Could it be that Julia has come to demand the murderer's life, having her husband marry his mistress right before her spirit? If it were me, I wouldn't be able to rest in peace either. Kristen looked frightened and guiltily hid behind Matthew. The next moment, the door was pushed open by a tall figure. Everyone was startled to see several police officers appear at the door. Kristen, you are suspected of involvement in a case of intentional homicide. Please come with us. These words, accompanied by a clap of thunder, struck Kristen so hard that her pupils instantly dilated and her legs gave way, causing her to collapse to the ground. Officers, you must have made a mistake. How could I possibly kill someone? Matthew quickly reached out and caught her. Kristen wouldn't even dare to step on an ant. How could she be involved in a murder case? Are you sure you haven't made a mistake? The questioned police officer retorted unhappily. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have evidence. If you don't believe it, listen for yourself. As he spoke, he took out his phone and played a recording publicly. It was what Julia said when Kristen came to the attic before her fake death. The entire hall erupted in uproar. So Matthew's amnesia was caused by Kristen using illegal drugs. She really played Matthew and the entire Marshall family like fools. Matthew never expected that the true love he believed in would turn out to be his enemy who hurt him. What karma, judging by this last sentence. Could it be that Kristen set the fire in the Marshall family's attic? Kristen let out a miserable cry. It wasn't me. Matthew, you have to believe me. I really didn't do it. It must have been that bitch Julia. She faked the recording before she died to drive a wedge between us. Matthew, don't fall for it. Every word from the recording exploded in his mind, making his vision go black again and again. Matthew felt an unbearable, dull pain erupt at the back of his head. How could it be? How could this happen? Kristen rushed over and wrapped her arms around his waist. Matthew, I just love you too much. He could no longer hold back a roar, turning around to grab Kristen by the neck. Kristen, you bitch. You made me lose my memory, took Julia's place, and kept provoking me to misunderstand and hurt her. You made me kill my own child with my own hands and drove Julia to a dead end. I'll kill you to avenge the mother and child. Kristen had been pampered by Matthew for many years and had never been treated like this before. In no time, her face turned blue and purple from being choked, and she struggled for breath. The instinct to survive made her push Matthew away with all her strength, shouting in a disheveled state, Matthew, didn't you say you loved me the most? How can you doubt me based on just a few words? Matthew raised his hand and slapped her hard across the face. You're not even worthy. Kristen was slapped to the ground. After spitting out a mouthful of bloody saliva, she raised her head with a sinister glare. Yes, I'm not worthy. The one who was most worthy was burned to charcoal and lies in a coffin, all because you drove her to her death step by step. Matthew, from beginning to end, it was you who cursed her, beat her, made her lose hope and despair, and cut off her path to survival. Matthew was overwhelmed with grief. He raised his hand and weakly pressed it against his chest, helplessly gazing at Julia's funeral portrait. He tried to recall the past with Julia, but no matter how hard he tried, his mind remained a blank. Those beautiful memories had been destroyed by Kristen. He broke down and roared. Like a beast driven to its end, in agony and sorrow, The top brain specialists nationwide were Matthew summoned, as he pleaded with them to find a way to restore his memory. Mr. Matthew. It's not that we don't want to help you, but your brain nerves have been damaged beyond repair. The devastating blow left Matthew completely defeated. From the day Julia was buried, he shut himself indoors, drowning his sorrows in alcohol day after day. It was at this moment that he realized, even without memories, he still liked Julia. Her steadfastness and deep love for him had unknowingly seeped into his heart. Sometimes he knew it was Kristen deliberately provoking him. Yet he still treated her so harshly. It was just a subconscious belief that Pei Ting would never leave him. Matthew drank his liquor, alternating between tears and laughter. The empty liquor bottle rolled clattering into the corner with a crisp, clinking sound. He drunkenly crawled over to pick it up and keep drinking. But under the bed, his hand brushed against a safe. The box had the words "Time Machine" written on it in large letters. It was his handwriting. Matthew broke open the lock. And inside the box were neatly packed 100 letters and a video camera. With trembling hands, he picked up the first one. This is the first love letter to Julia. I missed you a little today, actually more than a little. The hair clip you wore was very cute, and it matched your dress perfectly today, Julia. I want to be with you forever. The second letter. I accompanied you to visit your uncle and aunt today. Seeing you cry broke my heart. Julia, from now on, I am your home. I will never let you shed tears again. The 52nd letter. Julia, no sweet words today. I just want to marry you. The 99th letter. Julia, I will love you until the day my heart stops beating. Matthew held the love letter and wept bitterly. Julia, I'm sorry. Kristen. The news of the arrest quickly spread across the internet. The Marshall family's business image also suffered a severe blow, with their stock plummeting like a cliff, in no time. Kristen and Matthew became the villains everyone on the internet loved to hate. Every netizen who learned about the situation couldn't resist leaving abusive comments under their accounts, even feeling that they were unworthy of being called human beings. The more prosperous it once was, the more severely it is now being backlashed. Additionally, Julia's cause of death has led many netizens to petition with their real names to have Matthew imprisoned as well. Countless business partners, fearing that the public opinion might affect them, have sued the Marshall family for breach of contract and are demanding that the Marshall family compensate for their losses. Marshall family's company was in a critical situation, yet Matthew never showed up. He followed the video recorder's records and visited all the places where he had fallen in love with Julia. The park where they used to walk hand in hand had been demolished and turned into a nursing home. The dessert shop where they dated had closed down, and even the antique restoration studio where Julia had worked had moved away. It was as if the world, much like his own mind, had wiped away every trace of his love with Julia. Matthew knelt on the street, clutching the video recorder, his face filled with anguish and despair. He's the one who favored his mistress and caused his wife's death. Matthew, now that his mistress is in prison, he's not trying to get her out but putting on an act here. How shameless. Damn, what a scumbag, so disgusting. Some outraged passers-by threw trash at him, putting on a show of affection only after she's dead. Where was this earlier? Exactly, if it were me, I wouldn't have the face to live anymore. I'd rather just die. A few passing middle schoolers poured half a bottle of milk over Matthew's head, and he didn't even react. Back when he was discharged from the hospital, Julia urged him to drink some nourishing soup. But he blindly followed Kristen's advice, complaining that Julia was noisy and nagging, and in the end, he angrily poured the soup over her head. The clothes clung stickily to his skin. How heartbroken Julia must have been back then. They were right, he should have gone down himself to beg for Julia's forgiveness. Matthew's eyes shifted slowly before he suddenly stood up and dashed into the oncoming traffic. Only the screech of brakes was heard, followed by the sound of a heavy object hitting the ground echoing through the street. Several little girls passing by watched in horror as Matthew rolled on the road, covered in blood. They let out sharp, piercing screams. City BS noise and chaos did not reach the remote northwest. In this expanse of yellow sand, only the sound of wind whipping up sand grains and the methodical digging of a team of archaeologists excavating artifacts could be heard. Ms. Joanna, could you please repair this batch of broken porcelain? Julia was examining the gap in the silk cloth in her hands when she looked up and said, "All right, just leave it there." After faking her death and leaving, Julia came to the northwest using a new identity. Originally, she had only planned to stay temporarily, but by chance, she joined an archaeological team and ended up deep in the desert, resuming her old profession, in order not to reveal her identity. She gave herself a new name, called Joanna. During the half year she lived here, She lived a very fulfilling life. Her excellent professional skills also earned her the trust of the archaeological team. Even artifacts that are difficult to repair in other regions are transferred here, requesting Joanna's assistance. At 12 noon, she stopped her work, and a familiar figure also stepped into the workshop right on time. "Joanna, it's time to eat." Joanna smiled. "Liam, you're always so punctual." Liam walked familiarly to the table and laid out the food from the meal box for her convenience. "I have to be punctual. What would we do if we let our Joanna go hungry?" The sumptuous 4 dishes and 1 soup emitted an appetite-whetting aroma. Joanna, now feeling hungry too, she picked up her chopsticks without hesitation. "Let's eat." She picked up a piece of egg and put it in her mouth. The sweet tomato flavor made her give a thumbs up. "Delicious." Liam smiled and ruffled her hair. "Then eat more, you're too thin now." His gentle touch and tone made Joanna suddenly blush. When she first arrived in the Northwest, Joanna rented a room in a guest house, and Liam was her neighbor across the hall. At that time, she was in a terrible state, lost and gloomy. Once, she accidentally fell asleep on the rocking chair in the yard and woke up to see Liam sitting beside her, painting. Different colors were thickly layered on the canvas, transforming from a dense chaos into a sky full of stars. Julia was so absorbed that she didn't snap out of it until Liam turned to look back at her. She couldn't help but ask, "It's daytime now, yet you're painting the starry river." Liam smiled with his eyes curved. "The starry river is in the heart." Regardless of night or day, Julia was taken aback for a moment, then she also started laughing. Before long, the two became familiar with each other. They often made plans to go out for fun and drinks, until Joanna got a new job. Archaeological work was dull and arduous. Liam, in order to take care of her, did not hesitate to follow her deep into the remote desert. Joanna, after finishing her meal, lay down on the desk as usual for her noon rest. The sunlight from the northwest streamed through the curtains, shimmering on her face and causing her eyelashes to tremble involuntarily. A moment later, that annoying light disappeared. Joanna quietly opened her eyes and saw Liam blocking the light with his hand. Her heart suddenly softened. Over the past 6 months, she was well aware of his feelings for her, yet she never dared to take a step forward. Once, she had loved Matthew so deeply, only to end up dying in a fire. Now that she had managed to survive, she truly had no energy left to love someone else or chase an elusive romantic outcome. Liam also understood her feelings. His kindness toward her always stayed within appropriate boundaries, never making her feel the slightest discomfort or offense. "There's a bonfire party in town tonight. The boss asked me to pick you up to join. Would you like to go?" Joanna lifted her gaze and met Liam's gentle eyes. "Great. The traditional costume I had tailored last time can finally be put to good use. The town's tourism development isn't as robust as other popular cities, and commercialization is less prevalent. Original architecture can be seen everywhere, giving it a distinctive charm." Joanna changed into red and white attire, learned to braid her hair like the local girls, and applied light makeup. Liam was stunned the moment he saw her. He couldn't help but say, "Joanna, you look really beautiful." Joanna blushed slightly and thanked him. "You look very handsome in that outfit too." Liam was already handsome, and the pure black attire added a touch of wildness to him. Like a snow leopard on a mountain peak, the two walked side by side to the bonfire square, where the outer circle was already packed with people. The owner had reserved them a prime spot right in the center, surrounded by the firelight and laughter. It almost felt like a wedding banquet for the two of them. A few children ran up to them, laughing and playing, and asked without any reservation, "Joanna and Liam, when are you two getting married?" Joanna blinked in panic, unsure how to respond, and instinctively looked toward Liam. He, however, remained perfectly composed and retorted, "You little rascals, who taught you to ask that?" The children all raised their heads in unison and pointed at the boss not far away, who, in a fluster, hid behind his wife. Joanna couldn't help but burst out laughing. "The boss said once you get married, you can eat hand-grabbed mutton and whole roasted lamb." The child looked up with rosy cheeks, eyes full of longing for the delicious food. "Liam, can you hurry up and propose to Joanna?" Liam took out several lollipops from his pocket and distributed them. "Such little matchmakers with big ideas, go play now." The children ran off happily with their candy, leaving Joanna and Liam exchanging a helpless look. "Joanna, don't mind what the kids said, they were just babbling." Joanna shook her head. "It's fine." It's no wonder they jumped to conclusions. The two made such a handsome pair and were so close that anyone would assume they were a couple. Not to mention Liam's obvious preference and attention towards Joanna. 2 months ago, Joanna ate undercooked mushrooms at a small restaurant and suffered from food poisoning that night. Vomiting and having diarrhea, Liam didn't show the slightest, carried her on his back and rushed to the hospital. Staying by her bedside day and night to take care of her until she fully recovered and was discharged. That morning, Joanna opened her eyes and saw Liam sleeping by her hospital bed, and her long-dormant heart was deeply moved. The party didn't end until late at night. Joanna was unusually reluctant to call it a day, pulling Liam up to the rooftop terrace for a casual drink. The night sky was vast and empty, stars scattered across the wilderness, with a large, full moon hanging high, casting a hazy silver veil that enveloped them both. Before coming here, it had been a long time since I last looked up at the stars. I was like a dim meteorite orbiting a star that no longer belonged to me, tirelessly spinning. Later, Joanna drank the last sip of fruit wine and fell asleep leaning on the sofa. Liam looked at her reddened eyes and damp tear stains, his gaze deep and unreadable. After a long while, he reached out to wipe away her tears and said softly, "Julia, the harm you've suffered, I will help you return it to them 1,000-fold, including the previous life's share." City be called to report to Liam about the matters concerning Marshall's family and Matthew's car accident. His dead, the driver braked in time, so no one died. Liam's lowered eyes were somewhat cold. Quickly have the subsidiary companies sever ties with the Marshall family, and find an opportunity to let him know about the good deeds Kristen has done. After all the evil he did to Joanna, isn't this retribution finally catching up with him? The recent public opinion caused significant losses to the Marshall family. And even though Matthew was hospitalized after a car accident, the board of directors dragged him out to handle work matters. Last spring, following Kristen's suggestion, Matthew purchased a small island overseas. It was originally intended to be developed into a tourist destination, but when the development team went to that location using the coordinates, they found nothing but ocean in all directions, without a single piece of land in sight. When this news reached the Marshall family, the board of directors was furious and demanded an explanation from Matthew about what had happened. Matthew's face turned pale as well. He pulled out the contract that had been signed at the time and discovered that the coordinates on it were different from the island Kristen had taken him to. He had been deceived by Kristen. Matthew was so furious he almost passed out. After calling finance to audit the Marshall family's financial status, he dragged his lame leg and headed to the prison to settle scores with Kristen. But as soon as he pushed open the hospital room door, 2 police officers arrived just before him. "Mr. Matthew, we've discovered that Kristen has close ties with overseas criminal organizations and has transferred substantial funds through the Marshall family. As the legal representative of the Marshall family, we need your cooperation in the investigation." Matthew being taken away by the police sent waves of panic through the Marshall household, with everyone worrying about who might be next. In the prison, at Matthew's request, the police allowed him to meet with Kristen, once lovers. Now they sat facing each other behind bars, handcuffed, the affection in their eyes completely replaced by hatred and murderous intent. Kristen fearlessly mocked, "Mr. Matthew, when you drove Julia out of the company, you never expected it would come to this, did you? When you signed that contract, Julia reminded you hundreds of times, but you thought she was just jealous of your talent and signed it in a moment of recklessness." Kristen laughed until tears streamed down her face, her voice as soft and eerie as a female ghost's. "With losses in the tens of billions now, even if you took out your grandmother's burial money, it wouldn't be enough to cover it, would it? You." Matthew clenched his fists and slammed them on the table, creating a deafening noise. "Kristen, why did you do this?" Kristen laughed as if she had heard a joke. "Of course it's for the money. What, did you think it was for your love? That useless thing, only Julia would ever want it." Kristen looked at his blood-drained face without a hint of guilt in her heart. When she was 16 and her boyfriend tricked her into a casino in Southeast Asia, leaving her with massive debts, she had already extinguished her conscience. Recalling the past torment and suffering, being locked up in prison now actually brought her a sense of peace. She wiped away the tears of laughter from the corner of her eye with the back of her hand. "Matthew, since you've brought me so much amusement, why don't you have your secretary check how much of the Marshall family's assets are left?" Matthew shuddered all over, his spine went weak, and he collapsed into the chair. Marshall family news dominates the front page of the financial section. The Marshall family group sees its president Matthew, who was honey-trapped by a foreign organization, forcing his lawful wife Julia to her death, and his mistress Kristen both shedding tears behind bars. Currently, all affairs of the Marshall family are being taken over by the eldest son of the second branch, Marshall family's Jerry. Can the second young master turn the tide? Joanna was momentarily stunned when she heard her own name from her boss's phone. The Marshall family had extensive business branches. But ever since Kristen appeared, their overseas subsidiaries kept losing money and shutting down. Joanna had secretly investigated the cause and discovered that the overseas company assets were being transferred to an obscure organization. She submitted the investigation results to Matthew, only to find the report in the shredder the next day, ending up like this. Matthew had no one to blame but himself. Joanna stirred her coffee while looking out the window, feeling neither the satisfaction of knowing Matthew was having a hard time, nor any self-pity for her own past. It was like a still, ancient well that would never ripple again because of him. A piece of peanut cake, toasted to a fragrant crisp, interrupted her thoughts. Looking up, she saw Liam's expectant eyes. Want to try it? Joanna picked up a small piece, the sweet flavor filling her mouth. She showed a satisfied smile. Delicious. After the holiday ended, Joanna returned to the Lulan ruins to continue her work. The team leader of the Cultural Relics Restoration Group found her and handed her an invitation. Joanna. This is an invitation from City B for the Northwest Archaeology Academic Forum Exchange, inviting you to give a keynote speech on the Lulan special topic. Joanna couldn't believe it until she touched the invitation letter from City B, then showed hesitation. The team leader, seeing her prolonged silence, thought she didn't want to participate. Many senior experts will be attending this event. If you go for exchange and learning, you're sure to gain a lot. Joanna really wanted to go. But City B had too many people who knew Julia. If her faked death was discovered, she didn't know how much trouble and retaliation it would bring. Joanna, with her mind preoccupied, she went straight back to her residence. Liam didn't ask either. He took out a small card and drew a pitiful little cat lying on the table, with another little cat peeking around the corner with a question mark above its head. Joanna was amused and took out that invitation. I'm troubled by this matter, Liam asked. Do you want to go? I do. But, Liam patted her head, if you want to go, then we'll go. Don't be afraid, I've got everything covered. This sentence almost made Joanna shed tears. After her parents passed away, only Matthew had told her don't be afraid, I'm here for you, shielding her behind him. Later, he lost his memory, broke his promise, and became the sharp blade that hurt her. Joanna's moist eyes made Liam panic. He carefully and restrainedly held her in his arms. Joanna, let me protect you from now on, okay? Joanna looked up at Liam's earnest, almost pleading expression, and gently nodded. Okay. That night, Liam stayed over in Joanna's room for the first time. The morning sunlight streamed through the window lattice into the room. Joanna groggily opened her eyes, only to find herself alone in the bed. The aroma of fried eggs wafted from the kitchen, and she walked over somewhat dazedly. She saw Liam busily preparing breakfast while wearing an apron. Upon seeing her, he turned off the stove and walked over, placing a gentle good morning kiss on her forehead. Good morning, Joanna. Joanna felt the warm touch on her forehead and smiled radiantly. Good morning, Liam. The next day, the two took a flight back to City B. Liam took Joanna through the VIP channel, which led directly to the underground parking lot. The Kim family's car was waiting early. And throughout the entire journey, apart from airport staff, not a single outsider was encountered. On the day of the exchange, Joanna wore an elegant cheongsam paired with a black overcoat. Her hair was swept up, revealing her slender neck, and she caught everyone's attention the moment she entered the venue. After so many years, speaking again in an academic setting, even though Joanna was very confident in her abilities, she couldn't help but feel a little nervous, as the host called her name. All the lights in the venue focused on her. Joanna walked step by step toward the podium and suddenly met the gaze of Liam sitting in the front row. Liam smiled and gave her a thumbs-up gesture of encouragement. Joanna curled the corners of her lips and began to speak fluently and confidently. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'd like to share with you the development and preservation of the Lulan ruins. What Joanna didn't know was that the organizers of this exchange had temporarily launched a global live broadcast. The moment her face appeared, comments flooded the screen. Holy crap, she looks just like the deceased Julia. Could they be twins? I'd rather believe it's Julia coming back from the dead. If Matthew knew Julia wasn't dead, who knows what madness he'd unleash. For a time, all sorts of rumors ran rampant. Julia back from the dead Julia Joanna Several related topics quickly topped the trending searches, with countless people receiving push notifications on their phones, including Matthew. He suddenly stood up, gripping his phone tightly, his eyes fixed unblinkingly on the girl on the screen, his expression caught between crying and laughing. Julia, I knew you weren't dead. You wait right there. I'm coming to bring you home right now. Matthew quickly searched for the meeting address, grabbed his car keys, and rushed out of the villa. Liam, who had learned of the situation first, felt his heart sink. Just as he was about to escort Joanna away, he saw Matthew burst through the conference hall doors. Under the puzzled gazes of everyone, Matthew swiftly ran up to Joanna. "Julia, you're alive, it's wonderful. Do you have any idea how I've lived these past 6 months without you? Don't worry, Julia. Kristen, that bitch, is already locked up in prison. She can never harm you again. Although I haven't regained my memories, I know the one I love is you. I've walked through all the places we once visited countless times. It must be that heaven heard my prayers, giving me the chance to see you again in this lifetime. Julia, I'll take you home. Grandma will be so happy to see you." He tightly gripped Joanna's shoulders, too excited to control his strength. Joanna winced in pain from his grip, her delicate eyebrows furrowing tightly. "Who are you? Let go of me." Matthew quickly pulled her into his embrace, comforting her tenderly. "I'm sorry, Julia. I was just so excited to see you. Did I hurt you? Let me blow on it to make it better." Before his hand could even land on Joanna, he was shoved away violently. Matthew staggered back a few steps. When he looked up, he saw Joanna rushing into another man's arms. In that instant, his expression turned so ferocious it was as if he were a wrathful deity. "Let go of my wife." Liam stared at him coldly. "Mr. Matthew must be out of his mind. Your wife Julia is dead. You attended her funeral yourself. Have you forgotten?" Matthew stared intently at Joanna's face. "Impossible. I won't make that mistake a second time. Julia, please give me a chance, won't you? I'll become the Matthew I used to be. Let me make it up to you properly." Joanna lifted her head from Liam's embrace and looked expressionlessly at Matthew. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't know you. And I have no idea who this Julia you're talking about is." Matthew looked anxious, his tone somewhat pleading. "Julia, I know you're angry with me. You can hit me, scold me, do anything you want. But please don't abandon me. I'm begging you." Joanna linked arms with Liam and turned to leave indifferently. Matthew wanted to chase after them, but the venue security rushed up and stopped him. "Julia, Julia, don't go. Look back at me. I'm your Matthew." Matthew's heart-wrenching plea failed to earn Julia a single glance back. Blocked by the security guards, he could only watch helplessly as Liam walked further and further away with his arm around Joanna. Thrown outside the hotel, Matthew still desperately called out Julia's name. Kneeling on the ground in a wretched plea for her forgiveness, the black Porsche drove past him without a second glance. In the back seat, Liam and Joanna were nestled together, not giving Matthew so much as a look. Just as he had once treated Julia. "Does your shoulder still hurt?" Liam held Joanna's cold hand, waves of self-blame surging in his eyes. "I didn't expect him to come so quickly. I'm sorry." Joanna shook her head gently. "This isn't your fault. You don't need to apologize." She picked up her phone, and the screen was filled with missed calls, text messages, and large money transfers from countless unfamiliar numbers. Matthew knew she was alive, and it wouldn't be difficult for him to find her phone number. "Julia, I'm sorry. I was wrong. After you left, I've been living a life worse than death. I know all about the dirty things Kristen has done to get back at her for you. I've already sent people to retaliate against her. Julia, give me another chance. I will love you twice as much." Joanna looked at these text messages and found them utterly ridiculous. He blamed all his cold-blooded cruelty on memory loss and Kristen, but did Matthew really have no problems at all? Joanna refunded all the money directly and turned off her phone, leaning exhaustedly on Liam's shoulder. Liam took Joanna back to Kim's house and coaxed her to sleep, his heart aching as he looked at her pale little face. He knew that no matter what was said, whenever Matthew appeared, he would end up hurting her. Matthew had given her the most beautiful past, only to ruthlessly tear it apart and cast it into the mud. Joanna deeply loved the man he was before losing his memory, yet utterly despised the man he became after amnesia. The two sides constantly tore at her heart, leaving her tormented and in agony. Liam stroked Joanna's long hair, his mind involuntarily drifting back to memories of their past life. Julia, after dying in the fire, she didn't even receive a proper grave, being buried alone on a hill in the outskirts. Meanwhile, Matthew and Kristen held a grand wedding of the century and had 2 sons. Liam spent a year planning revenge for Julia, and just when Matthew thought he was about to take over the Kim family, he dealt him a fatal blow. The Marshall family collapsed and its members scattered. Kristen fled to Southeast Asia with her 2 sons before the bankruptcy. Soon after, news came that she had sold her 2 sons to pay off debts. Matthew went to Myanmar alone to find his son, but was captured and taken to the compound. The Marshall family spent their last few $1 million to get him out. However, Matthew's legs had already been broken by the compound, and he would have to rely on a wheelchair for the rest of his life. A few months later, a foreign debt collection organization came to the Marshall family's old mansion, demanding they repay the $300 million that Kristen owed. Matthew raged from his wheelchair. Later, on a stormy day, the Marshall family mysteriously died, and a once great wealthy family fell from grace. After Liam relocated Julia's grave next to her parents, he boarded a plane to return abroad. Unexpectedly, the plane encountered a bird strike over the Pacific Ocean and exploded. When he opened his eyes again, Liam had returned to 1 month before Julia's death. In order to rescue Julia from the devil's den, he set up a studio and accurately targeted the advertisement to Julia's phone. Feigned Death Services Studio, helping you break free from the cage and run towards freedom. Just 3 days before Julia's execution date, Liam finally met his client. Liam tucked the blanket around Joanna and was about to leave when she grabbed the corner of his clothes. "Don't go." Liam sat back down, only to hear her murmur another name the next moment. Matthew. Liam's heart felt as if it had been split in two by a sharp sword, sending out a suffocating pain. He looked at the girl's face with deep sorrow. "So, you still chose him in the end, not Matthew." "But Liam," Joanna kept murmuring these words over and over. Liam's pale face gradually regained some color. He let out a long sigh, burying his face weakly in Joanna's palm, and choked out, "You scared me to death." The exchange meeting still had agenda items on the second day. Joanna looked at Liam sitting across the dining table, noticing the dark circles under his eyes, and asked with concern, "Did you not sleep well last night? How come your dark circles are so heavy?" Liam touched his own face and joked, "What's wrong? Not handsome anymore." Joanna smiled helplessly. "You're the most handsome." Liam looked somewhat embarrassed as he gazed at her and said, "I had a nightmare last night, dreaming that you wanted to break up with me." Joanna was momentarily stunned, then reached out to hold his hand. "Liam, I won't go back to Matthew's side, never ever." Liam he interlocked his fingers with hers and said, "You said it yourself, and I'll remember it firmly in my heart." His childish demeanor made Joanna find it both amusing and endearing. "You've always wanted me to meet your parents, right? After the meeting ends, I'll go see your mom and dad. Is that okay?" "Of course. It is." Liam his eyes lit up, and he quickly made a phone call. "My parents will be overjoyed to see you." Joanna walked up to him, bent down, and embraced him in her arms. "Liam, I hope you're happy too." Liam felt a warm current spread through his heart, his eyes slightly red as he held Joanna close. "I love you, Joanna." Today's agenda only lasted half a day, and the exchange session officially concluded after the luncheon. During the banquet, Joanna went to the restroom and unexpectedly ran into Matthew, who had been waiting in the corridor for a long time. Joanna turned around without a second thought to leave, but was stopped by Matthew. "Julia, I found the 100 love letters I wrote you 10 years ago. Don't you want to read them?" Joanna paused, and Matthew seized the opportunity to stuff all 100 love letters into her hands. The thick stack of letters felt heavy in her hands, filled with the love that 17-year-old Matthew had for Julia. Joanna she knew she shouldn't keep them, but she couldn't bear to throw the letters on the ground. Matthew, seeing the ice in her eyes soften slightly, he couldn't help but lower his voice. "Julia, everything I did was because that bitch Kristen injected me with drugs. I was deceived by her. Julia, I know you hate me, but please give me another chance. Let me love you like I used to, protect you, and make you happy, okay?" Joanna closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again, her gaze was cold and unemotional. "Mr. Matthew, I don't know what you're talking about. If you don't let go of me, I'm going to call my boyfriend out." "No, don't do this to me, Julia." Matthew looked heartbroken. "Didn't you say you loved me the most? Didn't you promise to never leave me for all eternity? You're clearly not dead, so why won't you come back to me? Why?" His eyes gradually filled with madness as he tightly held Joanna in his arms, pressing burning kisses on the girl's face. "Julia, you're just saying these hurtful things in anger. Come home with me, and when you calm down you'll realize you love me." Joanna struggled against his restraint, crying out anxiously, "Liam, save me." Matthew leaned down to cover her lips, his eyes bloodshot. "Julia, I forbid you to be with other men, even in death. You can only be my woman." The next second, he was forcefully thrown to the ground. Liam disgustedly furrowed his brow and punched him hard in the face. Matthew collapsed to the ground at once, unable to get up, letting out painful whimpers from his throat. Liam grabbed him by the neck and punched him repeatedly, each blow landing with a heavy, dull thud. Finally, Matthew stopped moving, and it wasn't until he spat out a mouthful of blood that Liam ceased, coldly warning him, "For the sake of the Marshall family, I'll spare your life this time. If I catch you harassing my girlfriend again, I won't let you off so easily. Matthew, covered in blood from head to toe, still stubbornly crawled toward Joanna. Don't go, Julia. Joanna spoke coldly and quickly moved aside. Matthew, you'd better behave yourself and stop pestering me. After returning to Kim's home, Joanna stared blankly at the 100 unopened love letters. Liam sat down beside her and asked, Aren't you going to read them? Joanna shook her head. I'd rather not. Liam smiled, afraid I'll get jealous. Would you? A little. But even if you don't watch, I'll keep thinking about it, so you might as well watch. Joanna gave him a somewhat grateful look. Liam asked, Do you need me to step away? Joanna shook her head and took his hand. Will you watch it with me? Those 100 love letters were passionately written by 17-year-old Matthew. Capturing memories of Julia, the dazzling young man in my memory seems to have never left. He sat beside Joanna and Liam, watched it with them until the end. Then said to Joanna, Burn it. Joanna's hand holding the letter froze as she looked at the young man, 17-year-old Matthew, wearing his school uniform with a leaf stuck in his hair from who knows where, was smiling unrestrainedly. Julia, burn the letters and live well with him. Love letters turned to ashes one by one in the flames, scattered by the wind. Joanna turned and threw herself into Liam's arms, unable to bear watching Matthew's fading figure. Liam, will you stay with me forever? I will, I promise. After burning the letter, Joanna completely let go, and on this night, she and Liam shared a more intimate touch. Joanna had thought she would never be able to accept another man in this lifetime, but she never expected to be completely defenseless against Liam's gentle and considerate advances. The fervent kisses falling upon her skin made her tremble and sink into ecstasy, as they journeyed together into a realm of enchanting illusions. Unbeknownst to the two, Matthew waited outside the villa all night, covered in wounds, watching the silhouettes of two figures leaning against each other reflected on the master bedroom's curtains. His heart plunged into an icy hell, aching with unbearable pain. He waited from the dead of night until dawn, unwilling to leave even as the rain poured down in torrents. Matthew was gambling, betting that Joanna would still be soft-hearted toward her, but until the lights went out. The person he was expecting still hadn't come out. Moments later, Matthew heavily fell to the ground. Liam, after tucking Joanna in, quietly left the room. The butler had been waiting at the stairs for a long time. Has he left yet? The butler shook his head. Not yet. He fainted 10 minutes ago. I'm not sure if he's faking it. Liam sneered coldly. Call the Marshall family and tell them to come get him immediately. Otherwise, I'll assume he's dead and dispose of him myself. The next day Joanna woke up with an aching back and sore muscles. Turning her head, she saw the man sleeping peacefully and couldn't help wondering if this was the same person who had been so wild and insatiable last night. Liam seemed to read her mind as he took her hand and guided it to trace the contours of his face. Genuine article, no returns accepted. Joanna gently ran her fingers over his straight nose bridge and long eyelashes. Since you're so handsome, I'll hold off on returning you for now. Liam opened his eyes and looked at her for a moment before rolling over and pulling her back under the covers. For the next 2 days, neither of them left the house, and Joanna had completely become the porcelain doll in Liam's hands, so cherished that he'd even want to feed her every meal. It wasn't until the day before meeting Liam's parents that the two finally went out to an auction house to bid on a gift for the elders. Before the auction started, Joanna and Liam agreed that she would pay for the gift herself and didn't need him to cover it. Liam nodded, but in his mind he was thinking about finding a time to merge their accounts so Joanna would have no excuse not to spend his money. During the first half of the auction, Joanna successfully bid on a blue and white porcelain piece and a set of white jade tea utensils, finally relaxing after getting what she wanted, until the final auction item was presented. Her gaze suddenly fixed on the glass display case. It was a jade bracelet, rich in emerald color, shimmering with a radiant glow. The auctioneer beside it passionately introduced the type and color of the jade bracelet, concluding by saying that this bracelet was originally part of a pair. One was acquired by the former Marshall family and has since gone missing, making this the last surviving piece in the world. Legend has it that this pair of bracelets was given by an emperor to his deeply beloved empress, symbolizing their eternal love and unwavering devotion. As soon as the auctioneer announced the start of the auction, everyone eagerly began raising their paddles, and the price quickly soared to 50 million. Liam raised his paddle. 100 million. Joanna looked at him in surprise. Liam, there's no need, Liam said softly. If you want it, I will definitely get it for you. 150 million. The bidder, who had been frequently raising his paddle, shouted, then turned to look at Liam. Joanna finally saw clearly that it was actually Matthew. Liam remained expressionless and raised his paddle. 200 million. Matthew glared at him fiercely and raised his hand to make a gesture. The auctioneer shouted excitedly, "Mister, Matthew has lit the sky lantern." Liam darkened his expression and was about to move when Joanna stopped him. After 3 strikes of the gavel, the auctioneer announced, "Congratulations to Mr. Matthew for winning this rare bracelet." While waiting for the tea set and blue and white porcelain in the VIP room, Matthew quickly walked over to Joanna holding the jade bracelet. "Julia, that bracelet you used to have, I bought it back." His eyes and brows were full of smiles as he spoke, about to put the bracelet on Joanna's wrist when she dodged away. Matthew's smile stiffened. "Julia, even if you won't forgive me, are you going to refuse this Marshall family heirloom too?" Joanna looked at him with icy cold eyes. "The Marshall family heirloom has already been broken by you and Kristen." Matthew recalled that unbearable scene and painfully knelt before her. "Julia, I know I was wrong. All I want now is to properly make it up to you. I can accept it, but Mr. Matthew, name your price. Consider it as me buying it from you." "Julia, I won't accept your money. I just want to give you a gift to make you a little happier," Matthew said with a pained expression and sincere words. "Julia, my feelings for you are as clear as the heavens and earth." Liam's deep voice sounded behind him. "Mr. Matthew, do you remember what I said when we last met?" Matthew, recalling the pain in his body, he couldn't help but tremble slightly. Yet the hand holding the bracelet refused to withdraw. "Julia, I'm begging you, please take this bracelet." Joanna stood up, lowering her gaze to give him one last look. "Matthew, listen carefully. I want neither the bracelet nor you anymore. I didn't want it in my past life. Let alone your belated affection in this one. It disgusts me even more." The bitterness in his throat made Matthew almost speechless. Seeing Joanna about to leave, he desperately raised the bracelet. "Julia, if you don't accept this bracelet today, I'll smash it to pieces." Joanna turned back to him in shock. "Have you lost your mind?" Matthew looked at her with numb desolation. "This bracelet was always meant for you. If you don't want it, it's meaningless." Joanna, her face was tense, trembling with anger. "Matthew, if you want to play the devoted lover, go find Kristen. Every second you stand before me now fills me with utter disgust. I don't love you anymore. All I feel for you now is hatred." Matthew held the bracelet as if struck by lightning, his heart aching as if being sliced by 1,000 blades. Watching the two of them walking away hand in hand, he suddenly recalled the countless times he and Kristen had deliberately entangled in front of her. Back then, Julia alone bore the weight of their love and vows, yet was so humiliated and trampled by the one she deeply loved. How utterly desperate she must have felt, and for so many years. He never repented. Instead, incited by Kristen, he grew even worse, going so far as to force her to drink the abortion drug with his own hands, and even physically assaulting her, causing them to lose the child they had longed for so long. Matthew drove his car speeding down the road, his heart aching so badly he could hardly breathe, and he had to howl to ease the pain. Torrential rain poured down, and lightning, accompanied by roaring thunder, split the sky, illuminating Matthew's tear-streaked face. The rain fell in sheets, yet it could not wash away the grief and hurt. Between him and Julia, there was already too much distance, emotions, lives. He could never repay them. On the sunny day, Joanna returned to Kim's home with Liam. To welcome Joanna, the Kim family went all out, specially hosting a grand party attended by Liam's close friends and relatives. Joanna was startled by the sudden burst of confetti as soon as she stepped through the door. Liam's childhood friends cheerfully shouted, "Hello, sister-in-law. Sister-in-law is so beautiful." "Sorry, sister-in-law, did we scare you?" "Welcome, sister-in-law, a warm welcome." Liam plucked the glitter from Joanna's hair and led her into the house. Behind a group of younger relatives, Father Shan and Liam's mom stood arm in arm, wearing expressions of anticipation and gentle smiles. Joanna had just finished her greeting when Liam's mom, unable to contain her excitement, pulled her into a tight embrace. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but she knew it was out of heartache. "My dear child, I finally get to see you. You've suffered so much all these years." Joanna hadn't felt her mother's embrace in a very long time. Being held tightly by Liam's mom, she couldn't help but feel her nose sting with emotion, and she clung back to her greedily. Liam gazed tenderly at the two people he loved most before him, feeling that life could hold no moment more beautiful than this. The party remained lively throughout the entire day, and it wasn't until evening that the guests gradually dispersed one by one. Kim's family garden was planted with a large patch of gerbera daisies, appearing serene and lovely under the moonlight. Joanna leaned on the windowsill, looking at the scene before her, and couldn't help but curve a smile. Her gaze fell upon the soft, lustrous, dark green jade bracelet on her wrist. Just now Liam's mom put this bracelet on Joanna's wrist in front of everyone. "Joanna, from now on you're my daughter. If Liam ever bullies you, just tell me." Liam's mom's hand was very warm, reminiscent of being held by her own mother during childhood, making her nostalgic. Liam quickly pledged his loyalty. "Mom, I would never dare to bully Joanna. Don't say such things." Liam's mom was finally satisfied, holding one hand of each, and asked with a smile, "So when are you two getting married?" Joanna blushed uncontrollably in an instant, and was pulled into Liam's embrace, refusing to come out no matter what. A rustling sound. Liam walked out of the bathroom and gently wrapped his arms around Joanna's slender waist. "What are you thinking about?" Joanna was momentarily stunned. "When to get married?" Liam chuckled softly, realizing she had misspoken. Joanna blushed bright red again. "No. I said it wrong. I'm not in such a hurry." Liam laughed even louder, only stopping when someone couldn't take it anymore and gave him a push. His head rested on Joanna's shoulder, the vibration spreading through her entire body. It was a tingling sensation, one she didn't dislike. In fact, she wanted to get even closer. "It's okay. You can get married whenever you want. Don't worry about what others think." Liam held her hand and kissed her fingertips. "I will always wait for you. No matter when or where." Joanna looked at him and suddenly felt a surge of boundless courage. "Can I go study abroad and get married when I come back?" Studying abroad has always been Joanna's dream. The world's ancient civilizations are brilliant and diverse. If I could learn and experience more of them in my lifetime, it would be a life well spent. It's just a pity that after graduating from university, I was busy marrying Matthew, and later, when he lost his memory, I gave up everything to stay by his side. Now that she finally had the chance to make a free choice again, Joanna still wanted to pursue her dream first. After all, having been reborn, she only wanted to follow her heart and no longer compromise herself. Fortunately, Liam was extremely supportive of her decision and immediately brought in a professional team to help her choose a school. When she received the acceptance letter, Joanna excitedly threw herself into Liam's arms and, for the first time ever, brought out red wine to celebrate with him. Joanna is not a good drinker. After 2 glasses, her cheeks turned red, and she started chattering away while holding on to Liam. From archaeological knowledge to childhood anecdotes, slowly, something seemed to drift through her mind. Suddenly, she cupped Liam's face with both hands and studied him seriously for a moment. "Liam, have I met you a long time ago?" Liam felt a warmth in his heart. "You remembered." Joanna had started attending academic conferences with her mentor even before graduating from university, becoming a rising star in the field of cultural relic restoration. At a cross-industry exchange event, the belated Liam stepped through the door and immediately saw Joanna standing on stage in an elegant dress, confidently presenting her academic achievements and sharing stories about cultural relics. Under the swaying chandelier in the venue that day, the girl's fair skin and bright eyes made her resemble an apricot blossom blooming proudly in the spring rain. After the event ended, he couldn't wait to chase after her and ask Joanna for her contact information, only to see her joyfully throw herself into another man's arms. Later, Liam found out that the man was the eldest son of the Marshall family, Matthew, who was Joanna's rightful fiancé. He thought he would never have another chance. But fate plays tricks, and now the once unattainable moon was nestled in his arms, sleeping soundly. Liam moved his lips close to Joanna's forehead and kissed it tenderly. "Joanna, luckily I wasn't a coward this time." On the day of their departure abroad, the sunlight was just right. The Kim family's relatives and friends reluctantly bid them farewell at the airport to see them off. Just as Joanna was about to go through security, her phone suddenly rang. It was an unfamiliar number. She hesitated for a moment but still answered it. "Matthew, what exactly do you want?" But what came from the other end of the phone was the piercing sound of sirens and faint, dying breaths. Joanna, her mind went blank, and she tightened her grip on the phone. "Matthew," a weak, hoarse voice came from the other end of the line. "Julia, I'm sorry, I won't make it to the airport to see you off." The next second, his phone was taken over by the medical staff. "Hello. Are you a family member of Matthew? He was in a serious car accident on the highway to the airport and has lost a lot of blood. If you share the same blood type as Mr. Matthew, please come to the hospital as soon as possible." After the call ended, Joanna looked at Liam without saying a word. Liam had also heard the content of the call. He comfortingly stroked Joanna's hair. "It's okay, I'll go with you." This multi-vehicle collision resulted in severe casualties, and the hospital's emergency area was filled with blooded patients. Liam shielded Joanna as they walked to the operating room door, where a young nurse was already waiting. Upon seeing Joanna, She handed her a small box covered in blood, her tone full of regret. When the accident happened, Mr. Matthew held it tightly in his arms, and when he saw us, he begged to have it given to Julia. Excuse me, are you Julia? Joanna silently opened the box. The jade bracelet inside was perfectly preserved. Without a single crack, she sighed and said, "My blood type matches Mr. Matthew's. I can give him my blood," as if, buying this bracelet. As the cold needle pierced her vein and blood began to flow out, Joanna felt as if she were falling into an illusion. After this, she would be completely even with Matthew, owing him nothing. In the operating room, all the doctors were on high alert, doing their utmost to save the life lying on the operating table, on the brink of death. Matthew felt as if he were floating. He walked onto an illusory sea surface, where a young man who looked exactly like him stood with his hands in his pockets, staring at him coldly. "Who are you?" The young man rolled his eyes. "Though I hate to admit it, I am you." Matthew was shocked, his lips trembling as he asked, "Can you tell me what I should do to keep Julia? I know I was wrong. For the rest of my life, I only want to be with her. Without her, I can't go on living." The young man looked at him coldly. "I won't tell you. You deserve this fate. You've hurt her for so many years. Isn't that enough? If you have even a shred of conscience left, let her go." Matthew's gloomy eyes completely lost all their light. "I know I'm not worthy of her anymore, but she's so wonderful. How can I possibly let go? She has the right to choose a life without you. You shouldn't be so selfish." The heartbeat data on the monitor briefly flatlined for a moment before returning to normal. The lead surgeon wiped the cold sweat from his brow. He's finally out of danger. Joanna and Liam didn't wait for him to wake up. After donating blood, they immediately headed back to the airport. Liam was worried about her physical weakness and wanted to stay a few days for observation, but Joanna shook her head. She didn't want to have any more contact with Matthew. At the moment Matthew was wheeled out of the operating room, the plane was soaring across the sky, heading to a foreign land. If nothing unexpected happens, there will be no further connection with Matthew in this lifetime. As if sensing something, a tear slid from the corner of his eye and vanished into the pillow. In the second year of studying abroad, Joanna and Liam held a grand engagement ceremony. Liam, to show off Joanna, finally agreed to his proposal. The entire ceremony was broadcast live on city screens around the world. As the lights lit up, City BS 10-meter screen displayed Joanna's slender figure in a cheongsam, attracting many passers-by to stop and watch. "My God, a live-streamed engagement banquet. Which wealthy heir is this extravagant? The bride is so beautiful, their silhouettes look perfect together. I'm totally shipping them. Oh my God, they kissed. This is even sweeter than a romantic drama." Matthew, numbly shifting his gaze away from the live stream on his phone, he pulled out the black potion hidden under his bed. This was something he had spent a fortune on from the black market. It was said to stimulate the brain's nerves, with a certain probability of restoring his memory. He picked up one vial. The black liquid was utterly enticing. If he could regain his memories, would he still stand a chance to compete against Liam? Would Julia still hold a little more attachment to him? With a determined gaze, he pulled off the cap and, listening to the elegant piano music at the engagement venue, inserted the needle into his arm, imagining it was him holding Joanna's hand, walking step by step down the entire red carpet. As he pushed the plunger, the black liquid spread through his veins like a pathogen, reaching his mind. Moments later, an intense pain sent him writhing on the ground as if struck by a high-voltage electric shock, driven by the instinct to survive. He repeatedly banged his head against the floor, trying to alleviate the deep-seated pain in his brain. "Julia, don't be afraid, I'll be by your side soon. Julia, wait for me. Julia, Julia." Matthew was in so much pain that cold sweat kept breaking out, his entire body as if drenched from being pulled out of water. A moment later, he convulsed and collapsed weakly onto the cold floor. In his unfocused pupils, Matthew saw a well-behaved and pretty little girl. He wanted to ask the girl's name, but couldn't utter a single word, only able to passively follow the girl's footsteps forward, until he woke up again and saw a bunch of unfamiliar faces. Matthew blinked and asked curiously, "Uncle, Aunt, where is this? Can I go play with Julia?" Joanna returned to her home country after completing her studies on the very day her cousin Liam was getting married. The two of them rushed to the hotel as soon as they got off the plane. After greeting the newlyweds, Liam was called away by the elders in the family, leaving Joanna sitting alone at her seat waiting for the ceremony to begin. The lights gradually dimmed. Joanna was playing with her phone when she felt someone sit down beside her, thinking it was Liam returning. "Liam, didn't you say you'd be back in half an hour?" She looked up and saw a face so familiar she would recognize it even if it were turned to ashes. Compared to the last time's calmness, she felt a touch more irritation. Joanna, her expression turned cold. "Matthew, what are you doing here?" But Matthew just tilted his head and asked with a face full of curiosity, "Big sister, do you know me, sister?" Joanna couldn't react for a moment, only to see Matthew take a few candies out of his suit pocket. "Big sister, you're so pretty. Let me treat you to some candy." Before Joanna could figure out what was happening, the current CEO of the Marshall family hurried over, pulled Matthew behind him, and apologized. "I'm sorry, my brother has some issues with his mind. If he has offended you, please forgive him." Jerry and Joanna locked eyes, and he froze for a moment. "Miss Song, long time no see." Joanna nodded and asked, "You said there's something wrong with his mind, what happened?" Jerry let out a bitter laugh. "He took black market drugs to restore his memory, and now his mental age is only 7. Don't worry, he won't cause you any more trouble." Joanna watched Matthew peeking over Jerry's shoulder, still persistently trying to hand her those candies, determined not to withdraw them until she accepted. "Thank you." Joanna selected a white peach-flavored one from his palm. Matthew smiled happily. "You're welcome, sis. I'm off to play with Julia." Joanna watched his retreating figure. Her anger replaced by a sigh of emotion. The once brilliant and dazzling favorite of heaven had actually become a carefree child. Who could tell whether this was fate's gift or punishment to him? Liam returned before the bride and groom made their entrance, and as soon as he sat down, he saw Joanna looking lost and disheartened. "You've heard about Matthew?" Joanna nodded. Liam tightly held her hand, wanting to offer her some comfort. For him, this might be the best ending. Joanna vaguely recalled how she and Matthew had once pledged their lives to each other under similarly dazzling lights, ambitiously vowing to conquer the world together and tell their grandchildren these stories when they grew old. Yet now, one remained forever trapped in youthful days while the other resolutely marched toward the future. Before summer arrived, Liam and Joanna finally settled on their wedding date. The Kim family spared no expense, bringing nearly 300 haute couture wedding dresses from around the world to Joanna, each one unique. They even filled an entire room with jewelry without hesitation. Liam accompanied Joanna from start to finish, finding every dress she tried on beautiful and feeling he could never get enough of looking at her. In the end, the two of them chose a wedding dress with a starry sky theme. It reminded Joanna of the Northwest where she first met Liam, and of the meteor showers they had chased together by car, and of the painting Liam had given her on the day they first met. In her heart, Liam was the brightest morning star in the sky. He pulled her out of the mud and guided her toward a brilliant future. Both of them were filled with anticipation for the wedding, and no one noticed a breaking news report that had disturbed the peace in City B. During a prisoner transfer at the Beijing Suburban Women's Prison, a car accident occurred accidentally, resulting in injuries to 5 inmates and 2 prison guards. They have been urgently transferred to the People's Hospital. As night fell, Kristen, lying in the hospital bed, suddenly opened her eyes. 3 years of hard labor had completely worn away her exquisite, jade-like beauty. Now, her face was covered in wrinkles, with 2 prominent knife scars running across it, making her appearance truly terrifying. To exact his revenge, Matthew spent a fortune bribing prison guards and several hardened criminals, who subjected her to daily bullying and assault, leaving not a single patch of unblemished skin on her body. The previous year, he even had someone throw concentrated sulfuric acid at her, if she hadn't dodged quickly. Men are all like this. When they love you, they overlook everything. But when they stop loving you, they demand it all back with interest. She pulled out the dagger she had hidden under the pillow, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Julia, Matthew, I will never let you have it easy." Joanna and Liam's wedding proceeded as scheduled. The lawn outside the church was covered with flowers, white veils fluttering in the wind, creating a dreamy and beautiful scene under the sunlight. Before stepping onto the stage, Joanna placed the white peach candy Matthew had given her into her mouth. The sweet taste unlocked a flood of memories. On her first birthday, her parents invited all their relatives and friends to celebrate her ceremony. The fluffy carpet was covered with all sorts of things, and everyone watched eagerly to see what she would choose. But the result took everyone by surprise. Joanna landed on the ground and crawled forward with clear purpose, immediately hugging Matthew, who was only a few months older than her and holding a white peach lollipop. This outcome delighted the adults, who all joked that the two might be a match made in heaven, and little Matthew looked at the fair, tender little dumpling of a sister in front of him, then glanced at the candy in his hand, and resolutely reached out to give the candy to her. This act of yielding continued all the way until they grew up, but as it turned out, The adults were right, although they weren't separated by distance, their story was just as tortuous and tragic. The door was gently knocked. And the staff reminded Joanna that it was time to go on stage. She swallowed the candy, looked at her exquisitely made-up self in the mirror, raised a perfectly appropriate smile, and pushed the door open to walk toward the venue. All the guests stood on the lawn, eagerly awaiting the bride's appearance. The light and heartwarming wedding march began to play, and Joanna, holding her bouquet, walked step by step toward Liam. Among the crowd, she saw the youthful gaze of Matthew. The tear-filled eyes of Father Shun, Liam's mom, her long-departed parents embracing each other with joy for her, and at the end of the red carpet, Liam smiling as he watched her. The day she first met him, Liam painted a picture and gave it to her. It was titled Stars Above the River. Later she asked Liam what the name meant. Liam just looked at her deeply, and in her palm, stroke by stroke, wrote, "The Milky Way above, shimmering reflections below. I stand by your side, awaiting your reply." Midway along the path, Liam reached out to her from afar, inviting her to join him toward a blissful future. Joanna gave a radiant smile and was about to take his hand when sudden commotion and screams erupted from the crowd. She instinctively turned to look and gasped in shock. Suddenly, a woman wielding a sharp knife burst out from the crowd, charging straight toward her. Kristen. Joanna hadn't even figured out why she was here when Kristen had already rushed up to her. The tip of the knife reflected a blinding cold glint in the sunlight, her terrifying face like a ghost risen from hell, filled with overwhelming hatred. "Julia, you've ruined everything for me. How dare you live so happily? Come to hell with me." Joanna tightly closed her eyes. The next second, the dull thud of a blade piercing flesh echoed in her ears, and a stream of warm blood splashed onto her cheek, scalding her so fiercely that her whole body trembled. "Someone's been killed. Call the police." "Holy shit, it's Kristen. She actually escaped from prison. How did she get in?" "Guards, stop her." The scene was in chaos. Joanna opened her eyes and saw Matthew's enlarged face blocking in front of her. His entire body had been pierced with several large holes by Kristen and was bleeding profusely. "Matthew." Joanna's mind went blank. Trembling, she reached out her hands to support the collapsing Matthew. "It's going to be okay. I'm taking you to the hospital right now. Just hold on." Matthew leaned on her shoulder, his blood staining the snow-white wedding dress. His pupils were unfocused as he looked at Joanna, and only after a long moment did he reach out to try to touch Joanna's face. "Julia, I remember. I really remember everything." "That's wonderful, Julia. Don't be afraid. I have no regrets in this life." Joanna's tears fell drop by drop on his face. "Don't speak anymore. The doctor will be here soon." Matthew stared at her without blinking, his gaze full of attachment, as if he already knew it was the last look of this lifetime. "Julia, you know, a lifetime without you would be too hard to bear, so, I guess I got what I wished for. Don't forgive me, I'm too despicable. Liam is a good man, live well with him. If there's a next life, I hope I can see you again, and I hope I never forget you again, and I hope you never get to know me." Matthew's hand slipped from Joanna's face. Joanna burst into tears. Matthew's funeral was very simple. In recent years, the Marshall family has weathered too many storms, their strength greatly diminished, and far fewer prominent families and socialites attended the funeral. Yet Joanna and Liam still went. Grandma Marshall suffered a cerebral infarction the moment she heard the news of Matthew's death and is still lying in the ICU without regaining consciousness. Joanna waited until everyone had left before stepping forward to place a rose. On the tombstone, Matthew appeared as the young man Joanna remembered so well, with clear, handsome features and a carefree smile, as if no troubles in this world could linger in his heart. "Julia, what do you think we'll be like when we grow up? I hope I live longer than you, so I can arrange your funeral and then follow you. That way, we can meet again in the next life. Julia, I love you." Joanna used a handkerchief to wipe the rain off his photo. In just one day, they truly became like Baoyu and Dayu, entangled for the first half of their lives. They ended up separated by life and death. After returning, Joanna fell seriously ill, with her fever once reaching 40 degrees Celsius. Liam stayed by her side day and night, not daring to leave even for a moment. In her chaotic dreams, Joanna relived every moment with Matthew. The only difference was that during their honeymoon, they didn't encounter any attacks or explosions, and Matthew didn't lose his memory. They lived happily for many years and had a pair of adorable twins, a boy and a girl. In the end, Joanna lived to be 99 years old and passed away peacefully the day after their wedding anniversary, and Matthew, just as he had promised, after arranging her funeral affairs, went straight to Switzerland to undergo euthanasia. Joanna awoke from a long dream to see the bright daylight outside the window. And the love of her life gazing at her with intense eyes. "Welcome back to the world, my love." The wedding was ruined. Liam feared Joanna would be traumatized, so they later held a private vow renewal ceremony in a church, which wasn't made public. Kristen was sent back to prison. Due to her repeat offenses and the severity of her crimes, the Marshall family and the Kim family jointly demanded the death penalty. Liam used his memories from his previous life to secretly guide the police in uncovering several major crimes committed by Kristen. One of these crimes was actually connected to Joanna's parents. That car accident back then was no accident, it was caused by the Wen family. The reason was simply because the Pei family discovered that the products provided by the Wen family were substandard and demanded to terminate the cooperation. After Mr. Wen's desperate pleas failed, he grew resentful and, together with Mrs. Wen, drove to the highway to intercept the car of the Marshall family. In the end, it led to the deaths of 4 people, and Julia and Kristen both became orphans. Under the offensive of the Marshall family and the Kim family gold medal lawyers, Kristen was sentenced to death and executed immediately. 3 years later, as the Kim family shifted their business focus to Europe, Joanna and Liam also moved to the UK. Both of them were very busy with work. But they still tried their best to make time for each other. On Christmas Eve, Liam took Joanna to Finland, where they saw a dreamy starry sky and the aurora. In the world of ice, the aurora filling the sky was like a grand and brilliant scroll, making one can't help but feel how insignificant humans are in the face of nature. Liam hesitated for many years, but finally at this moment, he told Joanna all about his past and present life. Looking at Joanna's surprised expression, he was so nervous that his heart almost jumped out. "You don't think I'm crazy, do you?" Joanna laughed, her laughter tinged with tears and relief. As she wrapped her arms around Liam's neck and leaned close to his ear, she said, "Liam, me too. I too was reborn, seeking a sliver of life for myself." And this lifeline that saved her from the flames was Liam's hand extended with love. Over the next year, they strolled along the Seine in Paris, admired the crimson maple forests of Canada, witnessed the first snow in New Zealand, and finally returned to the place where they first officially met. The vast expanse of yellow sand was now planted with saxaul trees by volunteers, with greenery breathing life deep into the desert. Liam bought that guest house and converted it into a 2-story villa, with the backyard transformed into a small children's playground. Joanna shook her head helplessly as she watched him work tirelessly from dawn to dusk, personally assembling all the slides and rocking horses. "Will the child be spoiled by you after they're born?" Liam brushed the dust off his hands, helped Joanna sit down in the rocking chair, and eagerly poured a glass of warm water for her. "No, even after the child is born, you will always be the first in my heart." Joanna exchanged a knowing smile with him. On the day the child was born, another pregnant woman gave birth at the same time. The 2 babies were placed in the same observation room for care. Joanna, after the anesthesia wore off, was Liam helped to go see their daughter. While scanning the glass panel name by name, "I spotted a little boy next to my daughter Sharon. His name is Jeremy Marshall." How Sharon and Jeremy later got to know each other and grew up together is a story for another time. At this moment, Joanna is holding Liam's hand. Strolling through the back garden, the bright spring sunshine swept away all the gloom in their hearts. Joanna listened quietly Liam as he went through the list of baby supplies they needed to buy. "What are you thinking about?" Joanna snapped back to reality and smiled, saying, "It's nothing, I just feel. It's really wonderful to have met you. The past has turned to smoke, and for the rest of my life, I will only walk hand in hand with the one who truly matters."